Today we're talking about the newest compliance directive coming from the EU, and this is called NIS2. So I'm here with Danny Zeegers. Danny is a NIS2 expert. He's pretty much the perfect person to talk to understand what many deem as the most important cybersecurity legislation affecting EU organizations, but not only EU. And of course, we'll get into that later on. So, Danny, it's really, really awesome to have you.
Thank you very much, Jessica, for the invitation. I will introduce myself a little bit. I'm Danny Zeegers. I'm specialized in everything around GRC, not only NIS2, but we do governance, risk, and compliance. We have also a system that's called Trust 2.0 because we believe that in a good setup of governance, risk, and compliance, it's an added value for the business owner who is wanting to achieve compliance. Of course, nowadays, DORA and NIS2 are highlighted because it's a European regulation. Europe enforces that next year all companies will at least have a gap analysis and a sort of label of compliance. Lucky enough, with some Fortune 500 customers, I started together with Karin Breton, my business associate. So we investigate what is the directive asking, how can we align that with the framework that exists, and how can we assure for people that they don't do some things all over again. So we combine frameworks. I'm very proud to say that we achieved NIS2 compliance for one of the biggest MSPs in Europe. So we want to help organizations to get insight, even if they hire us or not. NIS2 is a game changer, yes. Also, don't forget the CRA, Cyber Resilience Act, and that's also in place for bigger companies who have a connection in the OT world. Yeah, so much regulation.
It's a really interesting time out there, really. Compliance, let's be honest, it's never the sexiest topic, right? But it's extremely necessary given just the sophistication, the sheer number of cyber attacks affecting organizations around the globe. And just like you said, there's so many coming in now. DORA had just been implemented. And now it's NIS2. There's others coming down the pike. So I'll just say that, us at N2W, our aim is to ditch the drama for IT teams. And we really know firsthand that when a lot of these compliance regulations come into play, it comes with really a sense of dread. And I love that you guys are mapping procedure for companies so they don't have to reinvent the wheel. So let's get into basics of the directive. Maybe you can walk us through what the original directive was. I think that was in 2018. There was another update last year for NIS2 and again very recently. So maybe walk us through what's the objective here, who's affected.
Yeah, the objective is now, first of all, the coming 24 months that in Europe, 1 million companies will be compliant for NIS2 or on important level, and so the important framework or the essential framework. So what is the difference they expect from an essential company who is unmissable for the work of a nation, for everything that in a country is happening? They expect a 100% resilience. So there are some lower services where they say, okay, we approve when you are 84% ready, but keep in mind, it doesn't mean that you say you're 84% ready, that you don't have a resilience plan, that you don't have a business continuity plan, that you don't have recovery for backup. It's just that you have less automated services who cost a lot of money. So for an essential company, they say you need to have a Siemens SOAR. And then someone said to me, no, that's not an obligation of the directive. I said, yeah, well, be my guest. When you have 1,000 employees or people in manufacturing and you will do all the IT and support manually, you can hire, I think, 10 to 20 people, or you can decide to choose for a SIEM setup that is automated vulnerability reporting and warning. That's your choice. But that's something also that you need to decide in your risk assessment. So what is this do about? First of all, it's about complying an ISO 27001 level 3 level. So you have controls, you have clauses, you have the life cycle of your ISMS, the plan, do, check, the damage circle, that need to be integrated. The biggest concern from our perspective, from me and Karin as implementing auditor, is to get the board of directors involved. It's not a technical exercise. It's not about which product that you use. It's just about making the right decision. It's also about reviewing your processes. throw away data that you don't need. When we come in discussion with data and data costs, so why are you doing an exercise with data every week or month? And maybe on a daily basis, you're posting data that isn't useful for the company anymore. So my first exercise is always do data retention, do data archiving, and put it somewhere very safe and duplicate it, but keep it out of your data that is for your business critical processes, your digital crown jewel. So that's an exercise that we do together with IT. And in the several setups that we have now done, and where we achieved certification, it was always a success. We try to involve all stakeholders. They are the evangelists of our system. They need to help to improve the system. And then the pillars where this two wants to have is that we have pen test, vulnerability test, that we do that exercise. And then we've launched a new book. And the good news is that everyone who listens to this recording can have the book for free. So when they send an email to ask at G-D-com, they will receive their personal digital copy. The book is named Start to Risk 3D. It's in human language. So the purpose of the book was not to impress the risk manager in companies, but to give a CEO insight how he already now does risk assessment, but he doesn't know it. And in the book, we then reflect that to ethics, to sustainability, to climate change, to
Hmm.
cybersecurity, to backup and everything, so that it comes in the company DNA to do a proper risk assessment on all levels of their process. It needs to be just a reflex. Okay, an example, Jessica, climate change.
Hmm.
The warming up of the earth is giving us some serious problems concerning availability of our IT systems. Yes, but did companies discuss climate change? Did they discuss what will happen if we have a flood of water coming into our offices and our servers are drowning? What is your backup? My question then is in the risk assessment, does the solution work? Did you test it? Because you said to me, you have a backup. Did you ever test to bring your backup yet and to test your environment? And the processes can differ, but the approach will never differ.
Right. It's interesting because I want to talk about numbers in particular because I've heard many numbers in terms of how many enterprises are affected. And you mentioned a million.
Directly have the obligation to have a certification within the coming 24 months. The one country is a little bit faster than the other. Belgium, unfortunately, but fortunately enough for us, was one of the first having a system, have a certification system, having insight in what can we enforce at company side. So that 1 million, but don't forget also the supply chain.
Right.
And we'll speak about a business critical ITC suppliers with software, who provides just and firewall and stuff who are maybe not enforced to have a certification, but also those companies need to do a due diligence. So the moment that they say to a company, we want to provide you with a backup solution, immediately for a NIS2 important or essential company, a due diligence started. Okay. Is the company financially reliable? Do they have certifications? What is their assurance level on behalf of the not NIS2 certification, but do they have an ISO 27001 certification? Do they do disaster recovery? And when we speak about that context, I think in Europe, more than 5 million companies will be involved.
And not just in Europe, right? I mean, let's say you're an American IT service provider.
So when you say, okay, I'm an American company and I want to give you services, it's rare that they don't have an ISO 27001 and SOC 2 certification, because when that was so, I wouldn't do business with them, because in America and the United States, there's a complete other culture about certification and resilience.
Right. I think we'll get into that a bit later in terms of where to keep your data and how to do that, where to keep it within the jurisdiction. But the other thing I thought what you mentioned was interesting because there's a lot of technical aspects that are coming into play with this directive, but it's a huge cultural shift, right? What I thought was super interesting about this directive is that leaders will be penalized for inaction. It seems significant that they can't just say, this is another checkbox we should have for our business continuity.
The highest The skill of my colleague Karin Printemps is that she's an internal auditor. She has no ICT technical background. When you ask her how you can set open ports for a firewall, she will look with big eyes. But she does understand there needs to be a review of the firewall. And she will ask, okay, when was it updated? Show me the logs. Who has reviewed the logs? What have you done when you see that there is an increase of hacking attempts on the side of the firewall increased with 100 times on a certain period? Maybe as example, we had the issue there with the global heating in Spain when they had a blackout. But
Yeah.
also, UK was attacked because we do not believe that it was a technical issue on their solar panel. We truly believe that there was an attack on the system because UK saw in the same period an increase of 100 times of attacking attempt on those critical services for every citizen. So you need to review that. So it's not technical. It will not be a product that makes you compliant, but it will be the system that you set up to do an interrogation of services, the system to do risk assessments and to ask your supplier, what is your plan B in case that it isn't working? Do you have a plan B? We need to see it. And that will give the CAO a very comfortable feeling that, okay, people are thinking about that. You ask also what I think about it, that the CAO is liable. That's also enforced by the directive. Finally, I should say, we also need to think about the following. In the past, we took insurance. So CEOs took insurance against GDPR, against hacking. But those insurance companies are facing so many asks for a payout, and it goes in the billion of dollars.
Yeah.
So they also have enforced that they say, okay, a company will provide you an insurance, but first you must show us that you comply with NIS2, ISO 27001, and all the measures that are required. If you do not, we will not pay. And there is the liability of the CEO. He cannot hide that any longer. Cybersecurity is a topic of the directory of the board. And that's why it's also important that they understand the risk assessment, that they all understand their role. There is also a second thing that is new. They are now enforcing that the CISO is becoming a part of the board. And together with the CEO, they are responsible. And I think that's a very good approach. But yes, the CEO is liable. And yes, in Europe, that's new.
Yeah. So let's get into the technicalities a bit. As we said, there's a lot of aspects to this. There's incident response, there's supply chain risk, there's board level engagement. What do you see as pain points, the biggest implementation gaps that these organizations have? What are they not prepared for in your experience?
I need to quote Murphy here. You know Murphy from the quote, what can happen will happen.
Yes.
But he stated something else. He said, when you're in your company and everyone is saying to the CEO when he asks how it's going, it's very good, you need to concern because then something will happen. And that's the best one. The biggest gap is that we have always to review our own work. So when the tech guys are implementing a backup, who is reviewing it? No one. Then my question is, did you test? Did you check if your environment is working? Your mirrored environment that you're testing? And then they looked at me and they say, what are you requesting? See, that's a base fact of the NIS2. Resilience is not only having a backup plan for a critical situation or an anomaly, but it's also to have a disaster recovery test that you monthly, quarterly, half yearly, yearly. So let's now have this view around backup.
I just want to add a little bit of depth in terms of the testing aspect, because we saw this in Dora as well. And we see this with our customers, is that this is the biggest frustration, I think. And this is what people aren't prepared for in terms of getting those regular, automated, scheduled backups without disrupting production. This is key. This is really key because you're looking at a way to simplify the orchestration of your backup. So we've heard on our end from many customers that before they implemented N2W, they would have entire weekends in the office literally camped out to do a full environmental failover. And there's a lot of teams out there that really don't even know that it doesn't have to be that difficult. You can orchestrate all of your resources, prioritize all of your resources. You can test not just the restore of your resources, but also the VPC settings, the network configurations, the users, the permissions, everything. And you can generate report. That goes to what you said in terms of letting stakeholders know. So did you have a successful drill? You can generate comprehensive reports. When people think of drills, they think, oh no, I'm going to have to tell the wife and the kids that I'm not there for an entire weekend. But really, it doesn't have to be like that. And in terms of, like you said, supply chain, another thing is teams need to look for solutions that have multi-tenancy. So that is key with, like you said, you can just sort of hand off and say, well, that my vendor handles the backup. I don't know what's going on there. That's not true. You can do this very easily if you have very effective multi-tenancy, which means you have your supplier perform their backups, but also you have visibility into it through one single console, and you have the ability to easily audit through logs, through reporting, whatever it may be. So there are solutions out there, and we help many, many people with these simplifications.
Yeah. I also did an exercise for this interview that I'm going to be honest. When I'm speaking with a company, I also want to know, is this company on NIS2 level? Is this
Right.
company on DORA level? And my concerns always are with the backup. It's the heart of recovery. So I have had in the past that a 3D printing manufacturer, they were crypto locked. And then they said, okay, also our backup services have a problem, and they did an introduction of a new backup solution, and they called me in for a review and an audit. Lucky enough, they introduced an inspection and they improved the setup, because a week later they were hacked again. And they were able to retrieve the snapshots and to be online as their RTO and RPO advised within an hour. And what I want to say is that, okay, you have a very good snapshotting, but there is also a scanning unit in your solution that does a lookout. Are there new files, new applications who we miss in the backup? Because tomorrow HR will introduce a very good new tool, and everyone does time registration with his smartphone with the new tool. And the moment that there is a data recovery, they see, oh, the tool was never back up. HR needs to go on a manual research what happened the last 2 months, just to see this is also a part of a backup plan, and why governance is more important than the technical aspect. But put you another question, you have an immutable backup. So you're sure that the company will give you back the snapshots. So suppose they have a blackout and everything is gone and they are on a location in a near country and they do a restore. I think in most cases that will be for 90% no risk. But what if they're having a crypto locker? Okay, they have a immutable backup and you are sure that the backup the last 7 days is not compromised, but you cannot assure that there is no crypto locker in it. So the moment that they get a recovery, all of a sudden they see after a week they have the same issue again, because something that was somewhere hidden was triggered again and the situations all started over again. And it's not a future site, Jessica. We faced that in Antwerp, where 3 weeks they were not able to bury people because the systems were not able to recover, because every time that they reset the backup, the infection came again.
Right. Immutability is such a hot topic and it's such a trend. And I totally agree with what you're saying, that it's not just, getting that backup product to tell you that you can lock your snapshots or you can lock that backup. There's so many levels to that. For example, there's immutability on the software level and there's immutability on the cloud API level. So you can use your SaaS solution, for example, and lock your backup and make it so no one can modify it, for example, but they can. They actually can. If they hack into your account, into your SaaS account, they can unlock it. Whereas immutability using the classic worm model, right, once read many, that's on the API storage level. And that's much safer in terms of not having even the root user can change anything. And I think also what you're saying in terms of things like timing, for example, even if you're in the cloud, I think a lot of enterprise IT teams, they sort of spin up these backup solutions. And even if they do it in a hyperscaler, in AWS or Azure, and then they're sort of left to their own and they don't have anyone to, come with them for a health check. Or, hey, there's this new compliance regulation. Let's make sure you're doing a cross account a disaster recovery. Let's make sure you're implementing immutability often. No, because like you said, you wait 7 days, you have a corrupted backup again. And let's make sure you're running an unprotected resource report regularly, right? Because you have new resources, you may have missed it. So it's really about getting that compliance health check regularly and to make sure that your tool can give you that. And that's what we strive to do because it's such a fast paced industry. There's so many parts and there's so many capabilities within the software that we see customers aren't even using.
And that's why I mentioned the internal audit get in. After that was stated, okay, we have a good backup solution. We have a good company that we can work with. They have been screened. They have a good due diligence. They use Amazon S3 object lock so that you can assure for yourself that this is a very reliable solution.
Right.
You have a Fortune 500 company that is giving direction. You have a good setup, but the work is not done. You need to have an interview every few months. The market evolves.
So data sovereignty is a big focus on NIS2. How can companies ensure that they meet NIS2's jurisdiction requirements?
In our approach, we have in our framework 104 key measures. They're aligned with the 93A control of ISO 27.1. It's not alone about backup, but in my opinion, backup is one of the most important since it's the most important pillar of the business continuity plan. So that you, as a company and as a CEO, you need to rely it on 120%. Or is it easy? Is it present today? We have some situations where we discuss data storage. It's also a part or a layer that's very important for the backup solution. And daily we see gaps. Like the gaps are also governance, segregation of duties. You cannot imagine, Jessica, and how many companies Karin sees that the person who is creating the backup is the same as who doing the restore.
Yes.
That's unacceptable. Sorry. It's not compliant and it has a reason. And so the last company we prepared, don't forget, for the NIS2, we wrote 5,000 A4s of documentation. And that is the minimum documentation that is needed.
I just want to also touch on one thing you mentioned is that these compliance regulations end up costing a lot of money, right? They take up a lot of storage. And that's probably next to ransomware proofing and being afraid of breaches. That's the second sort of concern that we hear. That's very important when you're looking for a backup tool because you need to be able to really understand the numbers there. What exactly you're saving on? Are you able to automate your backups to cold storage, like the affordable cold storage, not sort of the default mildly warm storage that is really costing you money and isn't even allowing you to restore immediately? Sometimes it takes 24 hours to restore. So first of all, you're looking for that automation. You're looking for how those are stored. Are the incremental backups stored? Are the full backups stored? That's going to make a huge difference. And if you're avoiding any licensing fees, for example, there's some hyperscalers that charge a lot of money just for the privilege of backing up. With N2W, you can take your backup. It's very transparent and you automatically store it. There's a flat fee. They can bring that to the CFO and say that we're saving this amount of money. So I think it's another kind of thing they can check off. That's not necessarily within this compliance requirement, but it's a huge concern.
It's about compliance, about the budgets. And I'm going to say you why. For a larger company who's having a lot of responsibility, it's not only about cybersecurity, but there is also that they need to have sustainability. So nowadays, we have corporate sustainability reporting directive that the board of directors, they need to assure to their employees that they are comfortable having a job for the next coming 5 years. Well, of course, they need to see in budgets and money. And in our book, Dr. Risk 3D, we have a chapter, Houston, we have no budget. Just saying, okay, guys, we did some mistakes in the past and the budget slinked away because we bought the wrong backup solution, which is not sufficient for the approach that Europe is requiring now. Yes, that is an issue. But to be honest, when you gather and collect all the resources and FTEs that are involved with the setup, and you can decrease their time with a centralized communication system, you will not expect this, Jessica, but I can pay back the backup solution within 5 months. We have a very large MSP They save now monthly 25K on salaries because they don't get questions anymore about certification, no due diligence, no meetings. So they save money.
Yeah.
And that's important for the CEO. And that's also important. And that's why we also introduced a chapter in our book. And it will be a very good exercise for the CEO and his management team. And they can get that in balance. But they need to be sure, first of all, that this time they choose the right solution.
Yeah. It's total cost of ownership. It's really not about the price of the backup solution. It's everything.
The moment that you do a wrong backup of a Linux server who's doing all the search in your company and it goes down and you're not able to go to your snapshot and to recover it very quick and it will last for hours, how much will that cost?
Right.
In time, efforts, and your customers losing trust. And how much will that cost within a year? Because customers will say, yeah, they're not reliable or contract ends next year in April, so we'll stop it. So yes, we need to discuss budget, but we cannot let the vendors decide and influence the management of the board.
So, Danny, just one last question for you. As you know, being in compliance for all these years, where do you see this going in the next, let's say, 5 years? Does anything keep you up at night? Do you see any new pain points coming about?
The first challenge is that for the coming 2 years, the problem is that certification bodies will come under pressure because their research are not ended. Europe speaks about a shortage of certification, people who are able to do certification and audits in companies, a shortage in Europe of 30,000. That's a pity because most companies have delayed. They say, we wait on our national government in order to give us a good direction. But they wait and wait and they lose time. They could have done effort. Someone said to me, but the Netherlands doesn't have a framework. Germany does not have a framework. And even worse, they had a framework and they threw it away because it was not practical. But guys, you could do a setup of ISO 27001 in alignment with CMMC and you're ready for 90%. So you did not need to wait. Just in the last phase, you need to adjust. And then it will come also, you need to know hackers say harvest today, decrypt tomorrow. So the big rat from Russia, it will be able someday for less innovative vendors for backup solutions to crack their files.
Right.
So they find files that you have made immutable in the past, but someday we need to know, is that still in alignment with the future setup? NIS2, what we see, I think it will come in place in 2030, and it looks far away from now, but like you told, it's within 5 years. And I think that the greatest exercise will be that all IT companies who are in the chain of important NIS2 companies and DORA applied companies, they will need to have a resilience of 100%. And if you do not establish that, Europe will have a problem because all hackers will always find the weakest spot in an organization or in a country, and they will attack the rest.
I totally agree with what you said. You need to be future oriented and you need to know that your data is always safe. It's always recoverable. It's always available. It always has a true immutability there for, that extra protection, and questions need to be asked.
So don't forget, the hackers also use AI.
Yep.
On the moment that they're searching for data on the web, they will find it 100 times faster. And when they do their social engineering, they have background information, and that's a challenge. Lucky for me, the next 5 years, compliance will grow.
Yes.
We will help to make real fast decisions in selecting suppliers, not on technology, but on cyber resilience readiness.
Yeah.
We need to give assurance. The good news is there will be a lot of revenue. The bad news is it will only be for those companies who are innovative and doing the right investments. I just want that companies adopt the right spirit and the right implementation spirit, that I can be sure that my grandchildren, when they connect to companies, that their money is assured. So that's my ambition to achieve. Also, I forgot to mention there is a website, nis2.news. They can find objective articles. You can find there mostly weekly good inspiration. Happy to share.
So, Danny, this has been really amazing to talk to you. As Oprah says, everyone gets an ebook. I would encourage everyone to follow Danny on LinkedIn. Thanks, Danny. Bye, everyone. Have a great one.
Bye bye.